Welcome to our April block of the month, and we're going to go back to using our dryer sheets this time and finish doing some of the string foundation piecing on the rest of our blocks. So we're going to take the little blocks that we made last time, and now we're going to go ahead and add some fabrics around them to make these blocks. All right, let's do some prep work on our used dryer sheets. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and give them a press. We want to make sure they're all nice and flat. Okay, got a few more here. And I don't have my iron on the highest setting, it's close to it, so like a medium heat that we're going to have. Okay. All right, and then the next thing we're going to do is we want to be able to find the center of this. So we're going to start by just folding it in half lengthwise and give that a press. It just kind of puts a little crease in it so we can see where the middle is. And then I'm also going to do that lengthwise as well. Okay, so there we kind of have the center marked, and then we're going to go get our pieces ready to start sewing. So here's my dryer sheet, and I have pressed it in half each way so that I can it just gives me a way to see the center markings. And it's not critical that this is totally in the center because we are going to trim it down, but I do like to kind of start with at least it, in my mind, it's all nice and centered and where it should be. So I am going to take a pin, and I've placed it so that these points line up with this halfway mark and these points line up with this halfway mark. And then I'm going to put a pin in the center. And I have just decided that for my centers, I had used 2 gray and then opposite colors or different colors here. So I'm just lining it up so that the grays are up and down. And if I remember to do that every time, great. If not, it's not a big deal, but that may be something to consider when laying this on there, is the placement of your squares if you have a preference. And then I'm going to go ahead and I have it pinned in place, and I'm going to start by sewing on the strips. So let's go to the sewing machine and do that now. Okay, we are now at the sewing machine, and we're going to go ahead and start adding some strips. So I still have this pinned in place, and I'll just leave that pin there. And I'm just going to pick any side. It doesn't really matter where I start. I have grabbed some strips. I did have to cut some more yellow strips because I was running low on those. So just, if you need to do that, that's fine. Go ahead. And I just, maybe do one or so from a couple different fabrics, just so I can kind of manage. I don't need a whole bunch more, just sitting around. So that will make our fabric go a little bit further throughout the rest of the quilt too. So I'm going to go ahead and just line this up. And I have a raw cut here. It's totally straight across with a rotary cutter. It is one that I've done with my scissors, and it's okay if it sticks past. So I'm just going to make sure that I've got the strip covered. So you can see here that it is okay that it's hanging past, and then I can go ahead and start stitching. So I'm just lining it up with the edge of my center square. And I stitched that in place, and now I'm coming down here, and I'm just going to go ahead and trim that little piece off, and I can toss that. I'm just going to kind of finger press this out of the way and then turn so we can go on another side. And here I'm just going to add another strip. And again, same thing, it's not totally straight across, but I do want to line it up so that my edges are covered here. I've covered that center piece. And then down here where I'm overlapping, this piece is going to stick out a little bit more because I started with it above it. So I'm just going to try to line it up with in this case, it's my background strip or the black and white strip. I'm putting it there and just squaring it off. So I know that this overhung, so it will stick out a little bit, but that's okay. It won't really, that little bit of extra fabric in your piece is not going to matter. If you feel like trimming it up afterwards, that's totally fine. Okay, and trim that thread. I'm going to trim this piece off, and I'm going to save this. It's pretty tiny, but you never know when you might need a little piece, so I'm going to just set that to the side and do a finger press here, and I'm just going to keep working my way around the block, lining up the strips, and using a 1/4 inch. I'm just making sure the edge of my foot is along the edge of my strips. And then I'm going to just pull it back and do a cut with my scissors. Okay, we've got one more to add on. And that's the same piece. I don't want to use that one. I think I'll use this one. And again, I'm lining it up with the background piece that I have here, not necessarily the ends of a previous added strip, because that does overhang. So just, you know, if it hangs out a little bit, that's totally fine. You know, that way it's caught in your seam. And we'll just trim that off. And there I have my first round added. So now I can remove my pin, and I'm just going to go ahead with my little pressing board. And you can take it to the iron if if it makes it easier, but while I'm just sitting here at the machine, this works pretty good. Okay, and now I'm going to pick another color, and now I'm going to use the teal. And you can make this organized. I have decided to do one row of the yellow, and then I'm going to do like 2 rows of the teal and then finish with the aqua. Those are the colors that I'm using, but you can do it totally scrappy. You can make every one of these a different color. Again, you just want to make sure that the fabric strip that you're adding is definitely contrasting from your background strip, because you want that little diamond to appear. You want to be able to see that. So I'm going to grab a strip, and again, I'm lining it up with the straight edge, and there's a few little pieces sticking out. That's totally fine. And I'm over sewing. I've gone past my dryer sheet, so I know that it's going to be covered, and then I can trim that off and do a little press back, and then just keep turning it and pick another strip. Position it, and I'm making sure that it overhangs too over at the end here. And I'll pull that up and trim it off and give it a little finger press. Okay, and just keep working around. Okay, here I just have a little bit left and I know this piece is going to cover it, but I'm also aware that I don't want a bunch of little seams ending up right, close to where I'm going to be sewing these together. So I'm just going to offset this one the same distance from this strip. So instead of putting my strip right next to the edge, I just backed it off like 1/8 of an inch, and that will just keep my seams back a little further, and I still know that my fabric is going to cover that. Okay, and trim that off, and then we're just going to check it. Okay, and it does cover the back side of my piece. Now, if I want to, I can go back and trim this little bit off, but I'm not going to. It's going to be fine inside of there. And we have all of our strips added, and it's time to trim. Now we're going to take our completed, and piece. I've just been finger pressing it and with my roller pressing it, and so now that I'm done with it, I'm going to go ahead and just run the iron over it and make sure everything's super nice and flat, and then that'll really help when I go to do the trimming up on it. There, looks good. And it should have these jagged wonky edges, and that's good because we just want to make sure that every part of the dryer sheet is covered by the strips of the fabric. Okay, now we're ready to trim up our blocks, and once we have all of our strips sewn on, it's going to look like this, and I am going to start from the back side. So it's good that we want to make sure that when we put our strips on that we covered every portion of the dryer sheet, and so it looks, kind of straggly like that. So we're going to set that there. And I am going to work from the wrong side, so the right side is facing down, and I'm using the Stripology ruler. And then I'm going to kind of go ahead, and this ruler has markings that go all different directions. So one thing I'm going to do is I'm kind of lining the center points where my little square kind of will match on a line, so that way I know I'm, for the most part, kind of centered up. And then I'm looking at where my dryer sheet is, and then I can adjust accordingly. It's okay if I cut some off that where the dryer sheet is not, because they are stabilized throughout the rest of the dryer sheet that's still there, so it's going to be okay, just having the ends left. So we're just going to trim that down the size that we need it to be. Okay, and then I'm going to move those little bits out of the way, and we're going to turn it and do the other direction. And now I have a line here. I have some lines here that I can place to make sure that I'm kind of centered, using that square piece. I can see through the dryer sheet. That's something that's kind of nice about using the dryer sheets. And I'm going to make a few more adjustments. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. And we're going to trim that down. And slide this out of the way. Move all of our, I think it's time for a new blade. I've been pressing harder, so I'll have to look into changing that next. But then once our block is all trimmed up, it looks just like that. And then I have several of them done. And again, I'm not necessarily trying to make sure that that's perfectly centered. This one here, the distance isn't always the exact same to the end or even the top or bottom, but visually where our eye is going to see that it is in the center, so it's going to be okay. You don't have to be real, certain about lining that up exact or trimming it so that the points are in the exact spot. But we're going to go ahead and do this on all 12 of our blocks, and that will complete the month of April.